In this video, I'll demonstrate how to create a NanoServer virtual machine on Hyper-V. If we take a look at the Windows Server Technical Preview 2 installation media, on it we'll see that there's a NanoServer folder, and in there you're going to see a nanoserver.wim file, a Windows image file. There's also a packages folder that we could apply to our NanoServer WIM. For example, we might want to add the failover cluster role to our NanoServer, or we might want to install the Hyper-V guest package, the OEM drivers package, and so on. The problem is we've got a WIM file. Now we can add packages to that WIM file using dism.exe at the command line, but we can't build a Hyper-V virtual machine from a WIM. We need either a VHD or a VHDX. For that, we can download a couple of scripts from TechNet Online. The first script is called convert-windowsimage.ps1, so it's a PowerShell script. The second one is called new-nanoserver-vhd.ps1, and I could scroll down and read about each of these scripts and how they're supposed to be used. On Drive C on my local computer, I've created a NanoServer folder where I've placed the Windows Server Technical Preview 2 ISO, as well as the two scripts I downloaded from TechNet Online. I've also created my own script, which simply calls the new-nanoserver VHD script. Let's take a look at the Create PS1 script in the PowerShell ISE. The first thing I'll do is set the execution policy to unrestricted so that scripts I've downloaded from the internet and that aren't digitally signed or trusted will be able to run. So I'll just say, yes, I want to do this. And we can see here that my script is going into my temporary staging folder, C NanoServer, and then it's calling the new NanoServer VHD script I downloaded, where I'm using the -server ISO parameter to give it the path and name of the ISO for Windows Server Technical Preview 2, because remember, that's where the NanoServer WIM exists. Then I'm giving it the destination VHD path and file name, an administrator password. I'm telling it I want to build a VHDX file. The computer name will be Nano1. I specified a few packages I want to inject into my WIM file, and I'm giving an IP address to my soon-to-be created NanoServer. So I'm going to go ahead and run this script. So we can see the script is executing, and after a few minutes, I'm going to have a VHDX from which I can build a Hyper-V virtual machine. So now that the VHDX has been created from our NanoServer WIM, I've placed it on my Hyper-V host on Drive C in a folder called Virtual Hard Disks. So we can see we have the nano-1.vhdx file, and it's a little over 750 megabytes in size. So now we're going to go ahead and switch over to the Hyper-V Manager, and we're going to build a new virtual machine based on that virtual hard disk. So I'll choose New, Virtual Machine. This is going to be called Nano-1. It's going to store the virtual machine in the default C Hyper-V location, which I will accept, and I'll click Next. It's going to be Generation 2. That way, it can support my VHDX files, UEFI-based firmware, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next. I'm going to give it 512 megabytes of RAM, but I'm going to flag it to use dynamic memory. NanoServer has a very small footprint, but it really depends what workloads you're running on it. That'll determine how much RAM you're really going to need. I'll go ahead and click Next. I'm going to connect it to my real-world network, which connects to an external network, and I'll click Next. Here I'm going to use an existing virtual hard disk, so I'm going to go ahead and browse for it on the root of Drive C on my host under Virtual Hard Disks, and there's the Nano-1 VHDX file. So we'll go ahead and select that, and we'll build our new virtual machine. So now we can see we've got our Nano-1 virtual machine that's been created. I've started our NanoServer virtual machine, and we can see, in fact, that it's running. So I'm going to go ahead and double-click to open up the console to the Nano-1 virtual machine. The first time it starts up, you'll get this results screen, but normally, after the first boot, we won't see anything. There is no local interface to interact with, and we also cannot interact with this. But there's nothing we can interact with a NanoServer. So what we're going to do is switch over to a PowerShell command prompt and try to ping the IP address that we assigned to that host. And indeed, we can see we're getting a reply.